Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Cloud Week. This is the first day of our Cloud Week. I hope you will enjoy. Okay, welcome to Azure Cloud Week. The structure of this week is intended to give you the most flexibility while giving you the necessary information and knowledge and hands-on skills as a part of our learning journey. I hope you will enjoy this journey and have fun and the full knowledge needed. I will explain a bit about the journey we are going to be going through this week. We will be on the first days. On the first part of the day, which will be for 2 hours, we will be explaining all the foundational tracks from Monday till Thursday of this week. We have live sessions to cover the foundation courses. And on the last day, we have an exam prep session that will include what you should know before taking the exam. And also tips and tricks on how to answer certain types of questions that you might find in the exam. At the end of each day, after we have 2 hours of explanation, we will be going through a 30 minutes break. And after that break, we will log in again and go to the Q&A and start to answer the questions and performing the labs. We will cover the labs during the live sessions, and you'll also be given some tasks to do as a homework. And I want to remind you that this recording is being recorded, so you can listen to that recording whenever you are registered, and you have the join link, access to record these sessions, and you can hear them on demand, okay? So this is the trainer weeks. As we said, it will be from Monday till Thursday, we'll be presenting, and on the last day, we'll be going through the exam prep. So let's start with our journey with the course that is AZ140. It is configuring and operating Azure Virtual Desktops. Then the name of the course is configuring and operating Azure Virtual Desktop, and the number or the code of this course is AZ140. So with you, this is me. This is Khalid Hourani. My name is Khalid Hourani. I am a Microsoft certified Azure trainer, an MCT, Azure technical trainer, and will be with you also Mr. Bilal Tarazi on the question and answer. Who is going to be our greater support guides for any questions that you might ask. For this course, as you know, regarding the certified Azure Virtual Desktop, there are some paths it is better to be following, and so that we can go through the knowledge in this course smoothly and easily. I will tell you some types of the Azure certifications. We have the certifications like the fundamentals, which is like an example, an AZ900, which is one of the courses that is better to be followed to get the certification for the Azure Virtual Desktop. After that, we have what is called the associate. One example of them is 104, AZ104. It is a certification for the associates. And the specialty we are going through today is Azure 140, which is Azure Virtual Desktop specialty. So when you get the certification, when you do the exams and you get the certification, you will be having the Microsoft Certified Virtual Desktop specialty. To be sure that you are going to have an easy journey, some information regarding this course or regarding the prerequisites of the Azure 140 is that the attendees should have a bit of knowledge working with the network technologies, including networking, virtual networking, application delivery, services, and architects or architectures. So it is better to have these, and you should also have some working knowledge about computing technologies regarding creating virtual machines, updating virtual machines, how to add some extensions to these machines. You also should have a bit of knowledge regarding the containers and platform as a service solutions. Also, we're going to be, or we need to have a bit of understanding of an on-premises virtualization technologies, including VMware, VMs, virtual networking, and virtual hard disks, because we are going to use a lot of these while building our service, which is Azure Virtual Desktop. We need to have some of these informations, or the most of this information, to have a bit clear understanding of what we're going through this course. Also, it is important to have an understanding of the resilience and disaster recovery, including the backup and restore operation in case we have or we face any problems. So these are some recommendations for the attendees of this week. Let's talk about a bit about the certification. As I told you, this certification is AZ140, and each certification is divided into certification areas. As you can see here, the study area and the percentage. What is meant by that? The percentage, the study area indicates the relative weight of the area in the exam, which is the percentage. The higher percentage here, the more questions that we will be expecting to have related to this area. For example, as an explanation, we have one of the areas, it is called Plan and Implement an Azure Virtual Desktop Infrastructure. As you can see, it is 40 to 45% of the weight of this exam. So we'll be expecting almost half of the questions related to this area. So then we go to implement an Azure Virtual Desktop Infrastructure. It will be around 25 to 20. And this is how the list goes. So as an explanation, you expect more questions when you have higher percentage related to the area. Okay, after we finish all these, or each day after we finish the explanation, we have to go through the labs. I want to tell you something about the labs of the Azure 140, is that we have two paths in this course. We should follow one of them, and I will advise you when we start the labs which path to follow, not because it is easier or not, or more, it has easier steps. No, it takes a fewer time, but sure, during the week, we will go through both of these areas. I will give you the labs to work on, and I will give you homeworks for the other path, so we can finish both of the labs. And you know, the labs is so important because you will listen for 2 hours for explanation, and then you will be doing the exercises just to fix the information you took during these 2 hours and fix them in your heads after performing the labs successfully. So as you can see, the lab comprise 2 separate tracks depending on the identity provider you decide to use. One, which is called Active Directory Domain Services, or Azure AD Domain Services. So one of these paths will follow during the labs, and we'll be doing the other one when we are giving the homework. I hope we finish both of them. They are almost so near or so similar to each other, and you will be seeing many related technologies that are the same in both labs, but one of them will be using the Active Directory Domain Services, and one of them will be using the Azure Active Directory Domain Services, which means that the Active Directory Domain Services on premises, while the Azure Active Directory Domain Services that are on cloud. So we will be doing the path. I will advise you to do the path, which is Azure Active Directory Domain Services. Then we will try to do the other path if we have the enough time to do that. But as a homework, you can do that and come back to me the next day with the questions you have, so we can discuss and finish them both. If we need to have additional resources for this course, we have lots of additional resources. You can visit the Microsoft Learn to have the necessary readings, additional readings, and you should do all of that before you attend the exam. You should prepare yourself. And of course, we have the last day, which is the day number 6. Number 5 will be going through the preparation together, even though after that you should have additional reading, additional preparation to have a successful or succeed in your exam and pass it easily. I will be helping you a lot with that, so don't worry at all. So this is the exam. We are talking about exam AZ140 on 140. It is configuring and operating Microsoft Azure Virtual Desktop. Regarding the country we are coming from, this price might differ. And though you then press on the schedule for the exam, you set the time, whether you're going to do the exam from your home or from, sorry, from the supplier side, from the supplier area. It is both. You're going to pass through some questions. I will be explaining a lot about the exam, the number of questions, what types of questions, and all of that during the exam prep day. This is the course outline. We have, as I told you, we have 4 days of explanation. We'll be passing through 15 modules. We will be covering them. On the first day, we will finish 3 modules from module 1 till module 3. On the next day, we will be also finishing 4 modules. Then we're going to finish on the third day the 2 modules, and at the last days, we will be covering the rest of the modules. Then we have 3, then 4, then we will be having 5 modules on day 3, and at the last day, we'll be giving you 3 models. Don't worry about that. So these models will be explained, and after the explanation, you're going to the question and answer. So you don't have to worry about anything. Everything will be explained, and then you have 2 hours or 2.5 hours for questions and answers regarding anything you might have during the explanation. Then we'll go through the rest of the models. Okay, the first model, we'll start with the first model, which is configuring and operating Microsoft Virtual Desktop. So this model is model number 1. So let's start. Just be happy, give me a smile, and let's start with explanation of the first model, which is the Azure Virtual Desktop. What is the Azure Virtual Desktop? When do we use the Azure Virtual Desktop? How to use it? What preparations should we do? What limitations do we have? How do we control everything related to that? That's what we're going to be seeing with the model number 1. As you can see, this is the outline of model number 1, Azure Virtual Desktop for Enterprise. We'll be introducing that. We will be talking about the environment components. We'll be discussing the personal and the pooled desktops. We'll be talking about service updates. Of course, the updates is always necessary and important to update everything. How do we update our clients? How do we update our pools? How do we update our servers? What are the sources of updates and how do we do that? And then we'll go to the limitations of this service. We'll talk also about the virtual machine sizing, the Azure Virtual Machine Desktop pricing, which is a very important topic. As you know, pricing is very important. How do we control the pricing? How do we get the best with pricing, how do we mix between the hybrid and the on-premise to get the best of the pricing model that we should always take control or take care about, because as you know, pricing is the most important factor in any service that we need to use. So let's start. First thing, what is Azure Virtual Desktop for the enterprise? So Azure Virtual Desktop is a desktop and an application virtualization service that runs in Azure Cloud. So I am virtualizing the desktop and the application. Azure Virtual Desktop works across devices. It can be used with Macintosh, it can be used with iPad, it can be used with iPhone, it can be used with Android, it can be used with any browser, and it can also be used with Windows and Linux. Okay, then Azure Virtual Desktop is a service that works across Windows, Mac OS, iOS, Android, and Linux, with application that you can use to access remote desktops and application. You can also use the most modern browsers like Edge, like Chrome, like Safari to access your virtual desktops from anywhere. You can use your computer, you can use your phone, you can use your laptop, you can use your tablet to access this service. Okay, so what we can say about that, what is this technology or what is this service? This service is a service that allows you to use or to virtualize your desktop or your hardware or your computer and your application. Okay, then this is a virtualization service. It allows us to access our virtual desktops through any operating system or any device that we want to use, and we can also access it through the browsers. Why do we use it? Or let's say some common examples about the usage of this technology. Sometimes we might use it for security and security regulations, like financial services, healthcare, and governments. What is meant by that? It is best scenarios to use the virtual desktops when we use them, when we need to have virtual desktop that can be used by many users, having sometimes a shared pool, or sometimes they need to have personal pools. I will explain that later. So whenever we need to give an example where to use this virtual desktop service, we can use it with security and regulation applications, some elastic workforces like remote workers or contractors and partner access. Sometimes I have users that I need them to log into my environment or to some environments or to some desktop that I can share with them, and they have some temporary usage for that, so I can use or give them the ability to use this virtual desktop service, and they can use it for a certain time with certain limits on the application, with certain rights. So this is one of the best examples where I can use this virtual desktop virtualization. Also for the employees that I need to use the technology, bring your own device, like mobile users, call centers, and the branch workers. Sometimes I need to have specialized workloads like engineers, like legacy applications that do not run on some of the environments that I have. Some old applications, I need to make them work for some time, or to do an application that is a legacy application, so I can easily create this environment for them, and they can use this virtualization service to use this legacy application and software for maybe to use it, or maybe for sometimes for development purposes. Okay, as you can see here, this is what I mean. This is the user. This user can be using any operating system. Here is the Windows to access the applications and have, sometimes I have, as I told you, we have some profiles that are used for everyone, and some other times I might need to have for each user his own profile or his own desktop. That's when I'm talking about the personal pools, when I have some people that need to use the virtual machine and have some configuration for their desktops or for their applications, so they can have their own virtual desktops. Then this technology can be used for groups to share one desktop, or we can have customized desktop for a group of users or for a certain user. Here, when we talk about the architecture of the Azure Virtual Desktop, as you can see here, this is a typical architecture regarding the Azure Virtual Desktop. You can see here, here are the endpoints of the users that need to access the Microsoft Azure where the service is hosted. We have these users, as you can see, these are the users logging in from their computers, as you can see here, and they need to connect to our Azure service or to the virtual desktop service that is hosted on Azure. They need to pass through the network gateway that will connect them to this network, passing from our own on-premise Active Directory domain server, using the Azure AD to connect, or Azure AD Connect, that will be the path from my on-premise to the Azure Active Directory, which includes the main parts of, or the main components of the Azure Virtual Desktop control plane, which is the web access ability, the gateway, and the broker. The broker is the management service that will allow my users to log in, and also I will be using, or Azure will automatically will be running the diagnostics for my service. And if I need to run diagnostics on my virtual desktops or my virtual machines, I need to add some extensions for them. So this is the architecture of the main technology. We have here my own premises computers. We have the gateway that is responsible to connect me. I can connect through the Azure AD Connect. We can use the express route to let me connect, or the VPNs, I can connect to my service. And I should pass through the Azure Active Directory, which is being connected with my Active Directory domain server on my own premises, and I will create the desktop or the virtual pools for my images. And if I need to add more images, I will be using the spoke net as a hub and spoke. I create a hub and spoke technology to increase the number of the desktops I might use. So if I need more virtual machines, I will be using the desktop spoke VNet to add more virtual devices or virtual machines to my solution. So the main components, as we can see, we have the endpoints, we have the Active Directory domain server, we have the Azure Active Directory, and also the virtual desktop control plane that controls everything. And one important, more additional thing I need is the storage for my virtual machine disks that will include their operating systems, and we have also storage for the profile settings that they might need, because they need to have a place to store what I call the profile of the users, even if it is a common profile or if it is a personal profile to any user. We can use the Azure files with Azure NetApp files to increase or to make this service more beneficial or more active So I need all these components all together to have this perfect architecture. Sometimes this design might be smaller than this, or it can be larger than that. This is depending on the size of the solution that you want. These components, this is the perfect or the typical architecture for the service. Here we'll talk about the components that we control and the components that Azure will control. Or it is a shared responsibility, as we can see. Azure manages the web, the gateways, the connection breaker, the license server, the storage, the web access, and it will control the web access. Users can access the virtual desktop through an HTML compatible browser. So it is the responsibility to see this web browser and make the authentication and direct the user to the correct pool. The gateway is the responsibility that will connect the remote users to the Azure Virtual Desktop, and it will be the link between the on-premise and the cloud-based or the cloud service. We have the connection breaker. The connection breaker is responsible for managing the virtual desktops to the remote application. The connection broker provides load balancing, provides and reconnection for the existing session. It is responsible for connecting, and it is also responsible for the load balancing where this user should go, and this is due to the recommendations or to the configuration that we made. The connection broker will send the user to the pool related to the configuration when we created these pools. As you know, also the diagnostics is automatically being run through Azure. So the diagnostics for the service is being done and running always on Azure, so that it will always diagnose every service, every hardware, everything that is hosted there, so that in case any problem happens, the diagnostics will give us the success or the failures, so that if it is successful, everything is running well. Nothing to do. In case if there is a failure, what should you do in order to see what caused this failure? You can get that from the diagnostics. Sometimes you might need to add extensions to the component for the desktops in order to get the diagnostics of the virtual desktops, because the diagnostics will diagnose the servers, it will diagnose the service, it will diagnose the storage, but it will not go to diagnose the virtual desktops. If you need to have the diagnostics of the virtual desktops, then you will have to add some extensions to each of these stations. This can be done, of course, with ARM templates and being automated for the users, so that they have the diagnostics coming from the portal, coming from the service, coming from the storage, and also coming from the virtual desktops in use. Your side of responsibility will be controlling, designing, deciding what topology to use, which on the virtual network. You will have to use and configure the Azure AD, the Azure Virtual Desktop Connect, in order to decide what or how you're going to add these identities, what authentication methods you will be using for this solution, and also your responsibility is the Azure Virtual Desktop VMs must domain join. So it's your responsibility to make sure that all the clients trying to get into the Azure Virtual Desktop are domain joined, because you need to synchronize the domain and the domain users between the on-premise and on the cloud, so that it is your responsibility to make sure that this service is running well and going fine. Also, you have to take control of the Azure Virtual Desktop session host, or to decide what operating systems you are going to use. In addition to that, what licensing type, everything related to that, what Windows you're going to use. You can use Windows 7 for enterprise. You can use Windows 10 for enterprise. Also, you can use Windows 10 enterprise multi-session, and we use the multi-session as a pricing control, because you can join multi-users when using Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session, and you can use Windows Server 2012 R2 and above. Also, you can use custom Windows images. You prepare an image with pre-installed applications, with preloaded applications, and add some group policies or other customizations, and you can use that also. This is your responsibility, as you can see. So also the Azure Virtual Desktop Workspace, the Azure Virtual Desktop Space or tenant, is a management construction and to manage and publish host pools. Your responsibility to decide the host pool, what type of host pools that you're going to use, whether it is a personal or a pooled, and we'll be talking about that in the other slide or on the coming slides. Then this is your side of responsibility. Okay, then again, I will get back fastly. For that, you have your Azure Virtual Desktop or Virtual Network, it's your responsibility. The Azure AD is your responsibility. The Azure AD Active Directory Domain Services is your responsibility. And the session is your responsibility to decide the operating system and the session you are going to use. Okay? Now we'll talk about the personal and pooled desktops. What do I mean by personal or pooled desktop? Host pools are a collection of one or more identical virtual machines within Azure Virtual Desktop environment. What is meant is that by that, this host or the desktops or the images you are going to use might be used for one user or multiple users, and this is up to the environment you're going to use. As you can see here, we have here an example of different departments that might need to have different types of images. We have the HR, we have the finance, and we have the creative or the designers. These designers need a special virtual machine or a virtual machine configuration. They might need higher GPU, they might need higher processors, so they are going to need their own virtual image. So we have this pool is created, one pool is created for these persons or for this group. We have the finance who are using a different application, and we have the HR also using a different application. They differ in hardware requirements, and they also differ in the application they are using. So we can have one of two pools, of two types of pools. We have the personal, where each session's host is assigned to an individual user. Each one of them will have his own pool, or we have the pool where session host can accept multiple connections from multiple users that are authorized to access this pool or this group within the host pool. So we can have personal pool, which each pool is assigned to an individual user. This is the personal, where we can have the pool, which is session can accept connections from any user coming from different to use this application within the host pool. Okay, you can also set a lot of different properties on the host pool to change the load balancing behavior. What I mean by load balancing behavior, when I have a lot of users coming, I need to load balance these users into different pools, and this is going to follow one of two technologies in the balancing. I decide them when I create the pools, and I will talk about them on the coming slides. Okay. Sorry. The personal and pooled, as I said, where pooled sessions can accept connections from any user, while the personal is a pool that is used for each user that have his own desktop, can have his own data coming back to him whenever he logs in, and he has the authorization to get back to the pool or to the virtual machine he will be using. So this service, as you know, is an important service, and as a service, always we can, as you know, Azure is every day updating, maybe some time in every hour they are updating, and the operating systems are updating, and the security matters are updating. So that's why update is very important. So you have to take control or take care about updating your service. Here are the different sources to update. As you can see, we have the Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager, which updates the servers and desktops. We have the Windows Update for Business. Also, it is used to update the operating systems like Windows and all the series of the operating systems. You have the update management. It is responsible for updating the servers, and Azure Log Analytics, it checks the compliance, which means that always the Azure log analysis is checking the compliance with the latest updates, so that whenever I need to see if I am compliant, I need to check the score and see if there are some things I should know or I should do, and update my services. One of the best advices is that you should always update your sessions or your hosts every month for the latest updates. This is so important. You can use, of course, Intune, and Intune can configure the Windows updates for the business as well. If we are connected with Intune, Intune can configure the updates to be done automatically. So updating is very important. So always be updated and update your service. Of course, as a service, we have some limitations for this service. We can't create more than 2 application groups, okay, in a single tenant. If we need to have more groups, we should create another tenant. Don't publish more than 50 applications per application group. This is also so important. Whenever you are reaching the limits, just go ahead and create another application group. Don't deploy more than 5,000 VMs, and this will be divided into half whenever we are using the auto scale, because when I'm using the auto scale, more resources are needed, so we can't create more than 2,500 VMs. This number was going to be into half. So whenever you are creating the VMs, make sure that you are not exceeding this number. Whenever you need to exceed this number, go ahead and use another subscription and follow to have a larger number of VMs. Okay? You can't have more than 600 VM reboots per hour. You can deploy up to 399 VMs per Azure Virtual Desktop template. What is meant by that? When you are creating a template to deploy machines, you need not to exceed the 399 virtual machines. It can apply this limit. So if you need to create more, you just split them into another template and create them. You might separate them into sizes, you might separate them into applications, you might separate them. But know the limit is 399 VMs per virtual desktop ARM template, okay? While regarding the machine sizes, of course, we have different types of machines, we have different types of sizes. You know what size to use with what application, with what group of users. So as you know, the operators for data entry do not use the same hardware as the designers or as the, let's say, the financial department. You can just use the different sizes of virtual machines that we have. As you can see here, we have the entry level, you have the burst, you have the general purpose. Just take into consideration to use the proper size with the proper group you are going to be using. We have, of course, to follow some procedures to make sure that we are using the proper size and going through the sizing guidelines that we should follow in order to have the proper environment with the proper cost and the proper hardware requirements and each proper details that we should have. Okay, we have guidelines for that. I will share the links with you when I'm giving you at the end of the course, or maybe later I will give you all the resources that you might need to go through the guidelines that will help you decide the sizes of the machines that we'll be using. Okay? Regarding the prices, as I told you earlier, the price is a very important factor. You should always make sure that you are using the proper pricing methods. As you can see, we can use Windows Windows 10 multi-session. It can allow multiple users to log in with the same license. You can also benefit from the Azure hybrid benefits, which is a mix between the licenses that you have on premises with what you're going to use. This mixture can give you, it allows you to use your already bought or your already owned licensing with the technology. So if you have licenses for your servers, for your desktops, for your Windows, you can use these licenses. Also, another important feature which is the Azure reserved instances. Azure reserved instances is prepaying for the service for 1 or 3 years. So when combining together the Azure hybrid benefits with the reserved instances, you can have a saving up to 80%, which is a very high number. So this Azure hybrid benefit, when mixed together with the preserved or reserved instances, which is prepaying for the service for a year or 2 or 3, this pricing method can give you an 80% discount, or it's not a discount, benefits like up to 80% for saving. Also, you should use the proper session host load balancing, which is one of two, which is breadth first or depth first. In the breadth first, it will split the images into evenly for the host pools that you have, while in the depth first, it will be filling each host. Whenever the pool is filled, it moves to the next pool and start filling it up. This, of course, instead of reserving pools, it will be giving you or making you pay for what you are using. And this is up to, of course, you will need to take more consideration when deciding which one of these you are going to use, the breadth first or the depth first. This is up to the usage and up to the design you are using. Okay? Then, in this lesson, we have explained the virtual desktop components, described the Azure desktop architecture. We have to choose, or have now to choose, know how to choose between personal and pooled desktop. The personal, as I told you, the person have his own desktop whenever he uses the service, where the pooled is a shared desktop for all the users in the same group with the permissions related to that desktop. And now we can know and identify the limitations of the Azure Virtual Desktops to follow a procedure not to reach the limit of these limitations, so we can design it better before we start initializing or initiating this service. We can also now we know we know that how to describe the option of the pricing and follow the best plan to get the best of pricing methods by using, as I told you, the multi-session windows, or by using the prepaid or preserved uh, reservations, and also by mixing together the hybrid with that service. Okay. Now we'll go to model number 2, which is we'll be talking about the networking, how much networking or what bandwidth we should have for our connection. Of course, the bandwidth is very important factor that we need to take care of, because whenever we need to use the internet, we need the bandwidth to be giving us a slide and a smooth usage experience. We do not need to have flickering screens. We do not need to have delays or non-responding screens. So we have to take a good care about the bandwidth we are going to use. Okay, we have to know the capacity and the speed requirements that we are going to have, determine the connection round the trip from our location through the Azure Virtual Desktop, which means that where am I going to apply this service? I need to decide which location I'm going to use or to host my service on. There is a tool that will help me to do that. I always go for the best topology, which is the nearest. Sometimes you have to test the round trip between you and the nearest or the best round trip between you and where you're going to deploy the service. There is a tool that will help you do that. We'll go also through the two load balancing methods I mentioned before. We'll also be going to describe and talk about the subscription management. We'll also talk about the recommended configuration and performance, because as you know, the best thing or the most thing I am asked to apply as an administrator is the performance. Whenever I decide to use any service, I need the service to be performing at its best. How do I do that? With designing a well architecture, designing or deciding what capacity I need, what speeds do I need, and this is what we're going to talk about in this model. Okay, as you might see here, we have the recommendations that are needed for each and every user who's going to use this service. As you can see, for the light workload types, I need 1.5 megabits for each and every user. If I have X users, I should consider to multiply this number by the X user so that I can get the best recommendation for the bandwidth. It's also so important to know that whenever I need to have the performance being well, I need to take into consideration what screen resolution I'm going to use. The higher screen resolution, the more bandwidth I would need. So it must be a mix and match between these two in order to decide or to have the best decision which or how much bandwidth do I need when I mix between the workload type and the display resolution I'm going to use. As an example here, you can see, let's say I'm using a light with about 124 times 786 pixels all I need is 1.5 megabits per second. But when I go higher, let's say I need about 1920 times 180, I am going to have 5 megabits per second, or I am going to need 5 megabits per second, and the higher, the more bandwidth I would need. So take into consideration the workload type you are going to have, whether it's light, medium, heavy, or powerful users, and this will need higher megabits, and also take into consideration the bandwidth of required for you to have a higher display resolution. Okay, mix and match between these two, and you will get the best of decision what recommendation of bandwidth you might need. So study it well, decide it well, multiply the number of users you are going to use, take the best bandwidth in order to have a smooth experience with your service. The experience, Azure Virtual Experience Estimator, as I told you, this is where you go and have a round trip between your location and the locations that you are going to deploy or to host your service over, to determine the round trip from your current location through the Azure Virtual Desktop service. So the smaller the number or the faster the round trip, it will be the best place to host your service on. So in this example we have here, we have the West US with the least round trip time. Okay, you have to use the Azure Virtual Desktop Experience Estimator. It will help you to decide which Azure region to use for your solution or for your Azure Virtual Desktop hosting, where you're going to display it or where you're going to put it. And so the lower the number, the best, or the best round trip time per millisecond. Here in our example, the best place to host our service is the West US 2. Okay, you can go to this tool, which is free tool from Azure, to decide that for you or help you decide which location you're going to use. Recommended operating system for the virtual desktop. As you might see, the virtual desktop supports Windows 7, supports Windows 10, and as I told you, it supports the Windows Server. It does not support Windows 8. You cannot use Windows 8. You have, if you need to use Windows 7 or Windows 10, you should know which architecture you're going to use, the 64-bit or the 32-bit, and install the Azure Virtual Desktop tool on your computer or on the virtual machine you're going to use. And this will be the connection between your computer or your device, if you are going to use Windows, to connect to the Azure Virtual Desktop that is being hosted. And you will, through this utility, you're going to connect to the Azure Virtual Remote Desktop users that you are going to use. Okay, which is meant by that. The first step, you install this one, then you use the username and the password that are included in the Active Directory and synchronized with the service, and then you can log into the virtual machine or the virtual desktop you are using or you are intending to use. So whenever I have a lot of users, as I told you, we have one of two methods to distribute users on, or to fill the pools with. The first filling method, or using the method to distribute the users, is the breadth mode. The breadth mode is a technology that load balance between allows you to distribute user connection between different pools. How does this work? It uses a technology. Let's say we have pool 1, pool 2, pool 3, pool, etc. It will see the pool that has the pool that has let's say, the minimum amount or the least user amount, and it will send you there. So it will distribute the users evenly on the empty pools. It will be distributing them there. If we have, let's say, here pool 1 and pool 2 and pool 3, and we have a new user, it will follow to fill one of these users. If it has an empty place, it will go and send you to that virtual pool. While using the depth first, if I have pool 1, pool 2, and pool 3, one of the, let's say, pool 1 is still have one session that can accept a user, it fills it out, then it goes to the next one. So it fills the users or the pools. When it finishes filling up, it sends you to the next empty one and start filling it, the queue, one by one. So the depth first method queries the session host that allows connections and haven't gone over their maximum session limits, and it will send you there. It will fill them through the load balancing. Where do I use that or decide that? When I am creating the pool, I decide this pool is going to use the depth first or the breadth first. Okay? Okay. Sometimes some Azure Virtual Desktop administrators might need to install a virtual any application on the images, and you might need to take control of or to do something, some rules that are used for administrators. So you can, I'm talking about this regarding, let me tell you the name of the slide. It's some recommendation for using the subscriptions and manage the groups. Which meant by that is that as a user, I might need to log in or to have access or to have rules to do or perform some certain jobs. I might need to regain the access to the subscription. I might need to grant another user to access to an Azure subscription. I might need to see all Azure subscription. All these, as a global administrator in the Azure Active Directory, you might not have all the access to that. So that's where it comes to the method of elevating the access for the user. So elevating the access of the administrator, maybe for all the time or maybe for some time, you need to give the administrator the elevation permission or the elevated permission to perform such thing. Why would I do that? I might do that when I might need to regain the access for the Azure subscription, when I need to see all the subscriptions, when I need to allow an automation application to perform any of the roles of the administrators, because as you know, the administrators are like of grades, or we have a full administrator or a global administrator, we have a security administrator, we have different types of administrators, and sometimes you need to give one of the administrators a certain role so you can elevate him with this role using the elevated roles and permissions. Okay, so we'll go also to this slide, which is talking about the virtual desktop metadata. What is the virtual desktop metadata? It is the data available for you. It is the data related to the data of or to the information or to my virtual server, virtual desktop service. It has some metadata. Metadata is the data about the data. So it is not, let me say, you can decide to create your environment in any of the regions that allow this virtual desktop service to be hosted in, and this metadata, like the tenant names, the host pools, the application groups, and the principal names in a certain data center, and it can be hosted, mainly this service can be hosted in one of these regions in the United States or in the Europe or in the United Kingdom as a public. So where do I host my Azure Virtual Desktop? I host them in one of these locations. Maybe other locations will be available later for that. You can have and you cannot, Microsoft does not control or limit the regions where your users can access their virtual desktops or their data. So this data or this service can be hosted on any of the locations that are in the United States generally or in Europe, and maybe later on this service will be available in different locations. As you can see here, this slide is talking about the monitoring of my service as all. You can have monitoring for the virtual machine guests. You have virtual machine hosts, and you can also monitor the Azure subscription, because as I told you, we're talking about the recommendations. One of the most important recommendations is to diagnose your environment. How do I diagnose my environment? I can diagnose it by using the auto platform metrics that are being generated from Azure, because as you know, Azure has some automatically monitoring tools, and whenever I need to add additional monitoring for my additional, let's say like the virtual machines, I can add some tools, third-party tools, or some extensions to monitor the virtual machines, the guest virtual machines, and the virtual machine hosts. I need to get metrics from them. I need to diagnose them. I need to have them all monitored in order to see what is going on there. And all these metrics and all these diagnostics are going to be stored on my storages I have created for that. I have storage for the logs. I can also monitor the storage. I can monitor the metrics. I can have these metrics with these logs, and the storage, I can have them on my storage, so that I can have agents installed on different devices or different virtual machines I am using. Mixing all these together, I can have the overall idea about what is going on. So mixing them together, I can, and collecting data coming from the servers, from the security score, or maybe from the analytics tools, mixing them together, I can know how to go best and do the best, get the best of all my environments, whether it is a storage, whether it is a server, whether it is a service, whether it is a virtual machine. I can collect agents, and I can use the built-in features on Azure with the diagnostics coming from the agents, I installed as third party or an extension to get the best of my diagnostics in order to know what is going on. Okay, we'll move to the last model, which is the user identities. As of course you know that organizations are a mixture of users that are on premises and on cloud. So these users require access to those applications that are both on the premises and also on the cloud. So we have hybrid users or cloud users. and both of these users need to access both ways. So we need to take some consideration how to synchronize these users, how to control these users, how to group these users, whether they are coming from the on-premise or they are cloud users. They need to access applications that are on both sides. So we need to select the appropriate licensing model for the Azure Virtual Desktop requirements. We need to have the best licensing, as I told you earlier. It might be a multi-session desktop scenario. It might be using CALs. It might be using different types of licenses in order to get the best of licensing and the best of pricing and best of synchronization methods between both of these. As you can see here, this is the access of Windows 10 Enterprise using 10 Enterprise and Windows 7 Enterprise with additional, at no additional cost, because I already have the licensing or the licenses. I can use them that are on my on-premise. I can use them with the virtual desktop service. Also, another service or another license, which is called the client access license, this CAL, it is used with remote desktops. I just need to tell you that Azure Virtual Desktop is something like the remote desktop services that is a feature in Windows servers, and it is paid for the licensing of for the number of users that are using this technology. If I have or I own this license on my on-premise, I can just use this license and use it in my Azure Virtual Desktop service that I installed. So these licensing or these licenses can be used there. Okay, personal and multi-session desktop scenarios. Let's see here. Use these case scenarios if we have. These are some examples of the applications or for the users, or I want to know if I am having such a scenario. This scenario is, let's say we have hundreds of users. They are using graphic workstations. So I'm on double thinking. I see that I might need powerful computers or powerful size of virtual machines. As you can see here, we have many examples. I might need 112 gigabits of RAM. So I need to decide where am I going to use these. How can I see that? I see the estimates by using the Azure calculator. Whenever I press on any of these, I can see estimations that will take me and will tell me how much will this environment that contains 100 users with the type of the users that are engineers with 3D and simulations at AutoCAD or CAD workloads. So my scenario is 100 users with 112 gigabytes, or I have 1,000 users with 4 gigabytes. I will press here and show you the example of what I'm talking about. As you can see here, this is the pricing calculator. This pricing calculator will help me estimate what I need so that I can have some information about what I will be paying. This is the Azure calculator. It will be calculating and it will give me the sum for that. Another use case scenario for multiple user virtual desktop. This is another case scenario you can see here. Okay, I can also use the pricing calculator. It will show me the estimates of each and every one of them. So the best method is to use the pricing calculator or see the estimates when I know what I will need the number of users, the type of users, whether they are simple users or data entry users, whether they are engineer, or whether they are graphic designer. Each and every one of these users needs some amount of power like processing or memory. So how do I decide, or how do I estimate what I need? Is I do that by using the estimates or the pricing calculator, which I will try to show you again. If it is still calculating, I will show it to you whenever. Okay, it's now loading the estimates. It will need me to log in. I will do that, and I will show you back the screen when it is ready. Okay, let me get back to the presentation, and I do that, and I will show you the result. Okay, so also what is needed also is the storage, and let me get back to the appropriate storage, because as you know, each virtual desktop will need a storage for the operating system. It will need a storage for the profiles of the users. So I need to decide what is the best storage I might need, what sizes of storage I might need, and this will be an important factor that I need to take care of. You will see from now on what is called FS logics, and FS logics is designed. It is a solution, or it is a utility that you can use to store profiles or use profile containers. Here, all our profiles are being stored, and they are stored in a storage on Azure. The first thing is I create a storage account, then I decide to use the files, and on these files I use a shared storage or a shared folder, let's say, and we guide all the clients to take their preferences from that shared storage, and all this will be done through the FS logics utility that you will install in order to tell or to guide the broker where to get this information from. And this FS logics profile container utility is a recommendation to use in order to make it easier for you and for the virtual desktop clients to get the profiles from. So it is, I don't know if you even know the roaming profiles technology. It's like creating a shared folder on the server, which is the domain controller or any other server, and you guide the profiles. You set the path of each user to get the profile from, as we used to do that on Windows before going to the cloud. We used to tell the profile, we go to the settings of the of the Active Directory users and computers, or we can just deploy that through the organizational unit, and we guide the what I call it, the broker or the login procedure to go through a certain path in order to get the profile folder, to get the each user profile. If it is a roaming profile for a user, he can see this profile wherever or whenever he logs to this account, because it is following a profile path, and through that it can just be using this profile container to get data from. This is similar. FS Logics is the same solution. It will guide the clients to go to that location or that container to get information from there and get their profile loaded from that location. That you can do through a utility. It will be installed and you will be using that within the labs. It is not so hard and it will be easily deployed. Okay? As you can see here, I'm giving you this diagram, shows an Azure Virtual Desktop workspace with two host pools. As you can see here, we have host pool A and host pool B. You can see the two application groups. You can see here, we have this host pool host pool. It is using two different applications. We have users that are a group of users for the sales team. They are logging to this virtual host pool. I just created two pools for each type of users. We have the engineering and we have the sales. For the sales, I created a host pool that includes the remote users that are coming for their desktop. They can use, they all log in to this host pool A, and the engineering, they go to the host pool B. Host all A has two application groups. I can, within this workspace, which is the largest container, it includes, inside it, we have a host pool A. And inside host pool A, we have two application groups. Then we have one workspace, two host pools. In host pool A, I have an application group that has two application groups. And in host B, I have one application group that includes one application that the users of the engineering will be logging in to. So this is an example of a workspace that includes two host pools, host pool A and host pool B. This is the host pool A is a pooled pool, which means that all the users logging in here will be seeing the same desktop, will be seeing the same virtual desktop, while here in host pool B, each and every user of this will be seeing different users, different desktop or his own desktop that is designed or configured to see whenever he logs in from any location. Okay? Sometimes you might need to log in from a website, from a web browser. This web browser might be Chrome, might be, let's say, Edge, might be Safari. All you need to do to log in from this web server is that you have a username and a password and a domain. So you need to have these three. The first container or the first target is the domain. This domain that is connected to the host pool you should have a username and password to log into that domain. What else should you have? You should have a URL. This URL will guide you to the host pool that the administrator wants you to share or to go to. And then we have this tree, the first thing or this machine going from the web browser, you put in the URL that the administrator shared with you in order to allow you to subscribe to this virtual machine you are allowed to log into. To log in,
Hello, everyone. We're very so sorry about the issue. We will be back in few seconds. Sorry about that. Hello, everyone. Unfortunately, we are facing a problem with Khalid's mic. Unfortunately, we're trying to connect right there with him, but unfortunately, it's not going through. That being said, allow me to take over here. One moment, please. Just to make sure and verify that you can see my screen well. Making sure that you can see my screen. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, as Khalid, we're trying to say, uh, we can use remote desktop connections by web browser, by web applications. So we can have different applications that can be published using the web browser or the web client. And when we need to access the web client, it's very important for us to have those components ready for us. Those components such as the domain right there, the username, the password, as you have seen earlier with what Khalid have mentioned, it's very important for us to have a Azure Active Directory or Active Directory domain services in place in order for us to use this service. So it's very important for the user to have, we have the domain, the username of the user, and the password as well. Now, we don't need to worry about the browser right here because this can work across all of the systems, right? We can use it across Windows, Mac, or Linux. The main area right here is to use a browser. So in case you face some of these issues, you can definitely use the browser. Now there is a URL that's going to be provided by the admin, which is you in that case, right? And definitely you will see that URL in your demo and in your labs environment, and definitely that supported web browser right there. Now, it's very important also to know that you can use Windows desktop client across multiple devices. And those devices, when you need to install that client, you can use scripts, right? And those scripts can be used by PowerShell, right? Starting with pre-device installation, this is where I can install this across all of the users on the device using the command right here, which is msi exec.exe/I, and the path of remote desktop's client. And definitely this is going to be set up in quiet mode, right? So all of the users with a true value right here, this is where the users are going to be able definitely to have that client installed across that device. Now, in case you need to install this per user, the command is still the same, but the only difference is here, right? Excuse me. The only difference is going to be here where we have the all users criteria or all users value is false, right? And this is where we're installing the MSI installation per user as for one user. So I can install this per users. Now I can use Azure Virtual Desktop across my Azure and on-premises, right? This is where I have the hybrid identity. I can use that to make sure that I can use the users, for example, inside my on-premises Active Directory domain services to be authenticated with Azure Virtual Desktop. I can use that also to extend my Active Directory domain services to Azure to use those services. I can use hybrid identity in a scenarios where I can make sure, for example, to have that service, the Azure Virtual Desktop within my work environment, within my service environment right there, right? So it's very important to know that this can be used with hybrid identity, and I can definitely have, I can definitely synchronize those users using AD Connect. AD Connect is a tool where we can synchronize our users with Azure Active Directory. So if you have a users in your on-premises in Active Directory domain services, you can synchronize them to your Azure Active Directory. When you use AD Connect, there are 3 methods for you to use. The first one is password hash synchronization, where these passwords on your on-premises is going to be hashed and then sent to Azure Active Directory. And definitely, whenever the password is matched with that hash, that synchronization is going to happen. We have another way, which is pass-through authentication. And with pass-through authentication, this is where I can install agents on my Azure Active, on my on-premises, sorry. And those agents right there are responsible to authenticate the users from the cloud. So the authentication will happen on the on-premises side this time, not on Azure side. If you ask my opinion, I would tell you the best practices is to go for both. Why? Because in case you don't have accessibility or something happened to your Azure Active Directory, you still have the pass-through authentication. In case something happened to your on-premises workloads, you still have accessibility to your Azure Active Directory. We also have ADFS. This can be used definitely with Azure Virtual Desktop. It's a federation services right there where we can install definitely on our on-premises and use it with Azure. So this is a table right here where you can see the differences definitely between the 3 services. Starting with password hash synchronization and single sign-on, right? This is where we have all of these passwords right there. All right. So this is where we have all of these passwords right there, hashed and synced into the cloud. So you can see here, ensure no password hashes are stored in the cloud. That is not the case right here. So if I'm syncing users, if I'm setting up my tenant, if I'm enabling my users to sign in to my cloud services using their on-premises, if I'm implementing single sign-on, or if I'm enabling cloud-based multi-factor authentication solution, this is where I can use password hash synchronization. Pass-through authentication is where definitely I want to ensure there are no passwords stored in the cloud, and this is where I can install agents. Now, if I'm considering more solutions right there where I can use multi-factor authentication from the on-premises, or I need to use smart card authentication right there, or I want to see the password expiry notification on my Office portal or Windows 10 desktops, this is where I can go for Active Directory Federation services. So common scenarios to think about. I provided you definitely with the best of practices right there. And all comes down to your scenario right here. Do you need smart card? Go for ADFS. Do you need your passwords on the cloud? Go for password hash synchronization. Do you need the authentication happens from your on-premises? Go for password through authentication. Now, when we plan for these identities, when we want to make sure these identities are there using AD Connect, it's very important to remember that we can use powerful tools right there. It's very important to know that we can definitely use users who are signed in as Office 365 users, right? So the communication that is going to happen in the infrastructure right there is going to be based on Azure Active Directory or Active Directory domain services, right? So in case you need accessibility to have that accessibility definitely, or to access those identities through these identities to your Azure Active Directory domain services and Azure Virtual Desktop, you can use your synced users with Office 365. You can definitely use these users with different software as a service. You can have different applications, and you have that can have that kind of authentication and federation between Azure Active Directory and those services. So the main point of AD Connect is to sync those on-premises users to be able to use your Azure Virtual Desktop with these other services right there in case you want that. Coming back on the AD Connect protocols right there, I already explained, I believe, the password has synchronization, the pass-through authentication, and the federation integration, right? Now, the synchronization definitely is going to happen through AD Connect. And definitely there is a health monitoring right there for me to see if something happened during my synchronization. So these are the protocols and the components that AD Connect works on and use. Now, before I move on from here, I would like to show you a few things from my portal. Allow me to go to portal.azure.com and just switching the sharing right here. You should be able to see the sharing in a few seconds. One moment, please. So you should be able to see my login screen right here, right? So I'm logging to Azure, to portal.azure.com. And this is the authentication right there where I'm going to sign into my account. One moment, please. Here we go. So I'm approving this and I'm able to sign into my account, right? Now inside your account, in case you want to use AD Connect, the first thing you need to do is to download that client right there in order for you to definitely use it. So the first thing I need to do is search for Azure Active Directory. Inside my Azure Active Directory, I can see the overview right here, and I can scroll a little bit down to check this right here. You see, Azure AD Connect is where I can go right there and I can download the client and I can start synchronizing my users. So you can see right here that this is not installed. I can download it right here and I can definitely start syncing those users. Now, this is the type of federation and the user sign-ins. This is where you specify from your AD Connect the specifications and the options in order for you to use it with Azure Active Directory. So this is going to be, for example, pass-through authentication or seamless sign-in or federation right there, right? You remember the health check right there? This is where you can scroll down and check those health and analytics, right? You can check here the sync errors in case you have any problems with the sync. You can check your sync services to make sure that everything is healthy. And you can see the ADFS services in case you're using ADFS services with your Azure Active Directory. Now, I also need to highlight that this is one of the things you can use with your Azure Virtual Desktop. Now, the other thing you can use right there is Active Directory. Active Directory, if I'm typing this right, directory domain services. So you can see down here, Azure AD domain services, right? And I can create Azure AD domain services, but the difference right here between Azure AD domain services and Azure Active Directory is that Azure AD domain services is a service. It's provided to you by Azure. You don't need to worry about anything right there. You don't need to worry about your virtual machine. You're not going to manage virtual machine right here. This is a service. This is a service managed by Azure. So I can create this one right here, or I can use Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, or I can create a virtual machine in the cloud and also install or promote this virtual machine Windows Server to be an Active Directory domain services and use it in the cloud, or I can definitely use that hybrid scenarios we've talked about with AD Connect. Now, whenever you go to do the lab, it's very important for you to remember that there are two tracks of the lab. There is one track. Allow me to go ahead and share my screen again. One moment, please, so I can show you those two tracks. Might not see the screen right now, just give me 1 second, please. Moment. So I am opening labs right now, and I'm scrolling down just to show you. Allow me to share my screen again. So you can see there are two tracks. It's very important for you to understand this before starting the lab. And let me explain why, okay? There are two tracks right here. The first track is Active Directory Domain Services, which consists of steps to do, starting from preparing your deployment. And by me saying preparing those deployment is that you're going to create a virtual machine in Azure, followed by promoting this virtual machine to be Active Directory Domain Services. And then you will start create users in it. And then you will start having those users to be synced to your Azure Active Directory right here, right? Using AD Connect. You answered that, you know this, right? So once you do this, this is where you prepare for your deployment. Now, you will be able also to deploy hosts and session hosts right there immediately, but it's very important to prepare this deployment. Now, when we talk about different types of path, remember this lab has two paths. The second path right here is where you're going to prepare Azure Active Directory Domain Services. And what I mean by that one is this guy right here. The service that it's provided to you by Microsoft. But very important aspect to talk about here is that this right here takes 90 minutes to be provisioned. 90 minutes to be provisioned. That means it's going to take a lot of time for it to be completed. And if you ask me why it takes that much time, Bilal, I can answer a quick question right here and say in a simple way, if you're going to have an amazing tea, you have to wait for that boiled water, right? So definitely, if you need to have that great coffee, wait for the water to be boiled, right? So it takes some time to be provisioned. So in order not to lose your time to prepare for the lab and to work with the lab, you can start with this guy right here. This is your lab for today. This is where you're going to prepare for that deployment. Now, definitely you can start this one, this path right here, but remember that this takes 90 minutes of your time. And if it's going to take 90 minutes of your time and you don't mind, feel free. But in order for you to start advancing and preparing that deployment quickly, and in order for you, in case you face any questions and you want us to answer it during the Q&A session, we will be here definitely, and we will help you. So in case that takes 90 minutes, that might take more time, or you might, that's the session might finish, or the event might finish for today. So you have to keep your questions for us tomorrow to answer all of your questions. So again, I'll just show you what tracks you have today to prepare and definitely to go through while you're going to do the lab. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. Now the reason why I'm not talking about any other modules for now is because we finished the modules right there, right? So allow me to share that screen again. All right. So Three modules we covered today. Two and a half actually were covered by Mr. Khalid, and the rest was covered by me. And this is where the lab, right? You can see right here that the preparation of the lab at the bottom, the estimation time right there takes 60 minutes. And when you're provisioning this, it might take 90 minutes of the time. So make sure you go to the second path, because preparing deployment of Azure Virtual Desktop right there, this is where it takes 90 minutes for you to finish, not to provision, not to wait. You're not going to be sitting waiting right there to have that lab ready for you and to have this created right there for you. Now, there are a lot of links right there that we're going to share with you throughout our session. I believe we've shared few of them, and I'm going to definitely share more of them with you in few seconds. Allow me to go ahead and share this right there. So I will stop the sharing, and I will start by sharing few links with you right there throughout our slides. So I believe I shared already with you the sizing of the virtual machines, right? And I'm going to go ahead also and share with you some of these links. For example, Azure Hybrid Benefits. This is one of the links that it's very important in case you have it and you combine it with Azure reserved instances, right? So I will go ahead and share some links. And I'll go ahead and send this to everyone right there. Now, just to demonstrate for you one of these benefits right there, I believe Khalid showed you the Azure Hybrid Benefits, but allow me to go ahead and show you what is the real right there, how you can benefit from that price and how that price can give you that benefits of using Azure Hybrid Benefits. So allow me to go ahead and type in Azure Calculator. I will go ahead and share my screen in a few seconds. So sorry about going back and forth with sharing those screens right there. So virtual machine, right? So the first thing we need to make sure about is the virtual machine, right? Now, when we have that virtual machine, we can come down here and we can definitely look upon that machine. Let's say I have that instance of, for example, 23 gigabyte with 8 cores. Now, this is going to cost me monthly $313. Remember that the prices might change when you change the region. And the reason why that happens is definitely because of the data center. How much the regulations right there in terms of costs, how much Azure have placed inside that data center, how much they are paying for this cooling system or that electricity system right there. So the price, that's why the price might fluctuate between those regions. Now, when we go down, remember that you can use different plans, starting from your saving plans or 1 year reserved or 3 years reserved. Now, in case you are sure 100% that your workloads are going to run for 1 or 3 years, this is your go-to, the 1 or 3 years reserved. And if you look into the price right there, you can see that the price dropped into 132 USD dollars. Now, in case I have a license already and I need to use Azure Hybrid Benefits, let's take a look. It's 108. You can see now the difference between pay as you go and the license, including from 313 into 100 and few, right? So very important. Remember, if you want to choose the region, pay attention to that estimator for that latency. Because if you choose different region right there, just to make sure of the price, the trade-off right there might be the latency. So make sure first when you plan to choose the closest region to your users right there. There are other considerations to think about here, where when we choose the region, starting from, for example, the cost, going into the compliance or the standards right there. Maybe there are some information or data, or maybe there are some regulations you have to follow, right? For example, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And this is the right example we talk about when we talk about data sovereignty, when we talk about data residency, right? Maybe you might face a standard right there where you have to place this in your geographical location. And that's why you have to place that region closest to your users, right? Now, I believe also Khaled shared with you the estimator link right there. Allow me to make sure to give that to you throughout my slides. One moment, please. So I'm going to open that estimator and definitely share it with you in the Q&A section. Opening the estimator right here. And this is where I can go ahead and check what is the closest region for me. What is the round trip time for my users to go ahead and for that connection to go all the way to that region and comes back to me. Now, it seems that Germany West Central is the best one for me. Now, definitely I need to do some refreshes right there in order for me to see the most common one. Because as you may know, as a best practice, that connection right there is jumping between hubs. And it's not always the same time you'll get the same region right there or the same latency. So it's very important to refresh this page just to make sure that you are on the right track or on the right region. Right, so I'll go ahead definitely and share with you this estimator tool in a Q&A section. Now, unfortunately, let me explain something about the labs before. This have been sent to all, I believe. Okay, unfortunately, regarding the labs, I'm going to send to you how to access your labs, okay? And Khalid is going to guide you after 30 minutes on how to access the labs, how to redeem your Azure subscription, because I believe Khalid already got his connection back, I believe, with a microphone right there. So we will go ahead and take a 30 minutes break. And after the 30 minutes break, we will explain to you everything regarding the lab, how you can access the labs, how you can make sure of how to redeem that code, and how to follow on the instructions right there in order for you to finish that lab. So 30 minutes break, I believe that should be enough for our session right there. I believe there was so much information to process right there. So definitely allow me to go ahead and share with you 30 minutes right here as a break and place that countdown right there. Now, definitely there is 2 links just to make sure with you. There are 2 links on your calendar, one for here and one for the lab. So after 30 minutes, I'm expecting from you to go ahead and join that link. And from that link, we will go ahead and demonstrate for you the first lab. Khalid is going to demonstrate for you the first lab, and definitely we will be able to show you how to access the labs, how to redeem the code. And in case we face any issues, we're right here. So there is nothing to worry right there. I'm sharing my screen right here for the lab time. Okay, for a break, which is going to be 30 minutes. And after 30 minutes, we're going to start the labs. All right, so 30 minutes right there. I will look in case you asked me any questions, because I took over the session from Khalid. So in case you asked me any questions, I will be answering these questions in a little time. So allow me to go ahead and set up 30 minutes. And I will see you in 30 minutes. Thank you so much.
Guys, can you hear me? Hello, Bilal, can you hear me? Guys, can you hear me? Ah, ah. Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me now?
So guys, just to double check and make sure with you, we will see you in 30 minutes. You have to use the second link and we will see you in the lab Q&A. In case you got disconnected from this session, we will see you in the Q&A section. Okay?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bilal.
صوتك طالع بس كتير واطي، سوبر واطي. يعني بدك تقرب الميكروفون على تمك حبيبي.